Officially welcome you. My name is Janet Buning. I am the Vice President of Programs for Women's City Club, and I will be your moderator tonight. I'm not a professional moderator, so you're going to bear with me, but we're going to have a wonderful, friendly, personal conversation with three amazing speakers who are here with us tonight. Before we begin, I do want to remind you all, you maybe just heard the little note that this is being recorded. We do record our programs. We do post them. We put the link on our website, and you can watch them on YouTube and possibly some other media channels. And before I go any further, I want to introduce another very important person to you, Jeff Dye, who is our Women's City Club president this year. And Jeff is also our tech wizard and guru who's going to keep this program functioning. So Jeff, do you want to say a few words before I take over?
Few words. I want to be very brief. I'm really excited about this program. It's part of a series of things we've been doing lately, including our book club has been reading the book Harvest of Empire, A History of Latinos in America. So we're definitely looking into a lot of things around the issues surrounding immigration. It's an important issue. We've had several programs in the past on it years ago. So it's always something that is high on our list of concerns. I look forward to this program, and I also welcome any of you who are not members to become members of the Women's City Club. We're a 108-year-old civic organization that is just as fresh as it was the day it was born. So that's all I need to say for now, and thank you, Janet, for getting us started.
Okay, and thank you, Jeff. And I also want to take a minute to recognize the members of the program committee who have been extremely helpful in putting this together. I see on screen, I see Jan Seymour, who is here with us, Susan Noonan. Susan's right here on screen. You can wave to Susan. Laurie Frank is with us tonight. David Siders is on our committee. Sarah Gideons, and did I leave anybody else out? Jeff is on the committee also. So we have put a lot of time and thought into inviting our three speakers. We have the structure of the program tonight is a panel discussion with three individuals who are here present tonight. Tony Stieritz, who is the CEO of Catholic Charities, Brian Wright, who is the director, no, it's the wrong title, the executive director, I think. I've lost my own notes already. Yeah, the executive director of Cincinnati Compass, and Samantha Searles, who is the program director for Ignite Peace. Each of them have their own input, their own piece of the story to tell, and they'll go in order and talk about things. We had invited our Congressman, Greg Landsman, to be with us. Unfortunately, another commitment prevents him being here in person, but he was kind enough to make a video, which we will show after our speakers. And after our speakers have told you what they wanted to share with you about their agencies, we will have a question and answer period. Program is scheduled to end at 8:30. We'll do our best to stay on topic with that. So I think without a whole lot of further ado, I would like to get started with Tony Stieritz from Catholic Charities, and I'll let Tony tell us his story. So Tony, the floor is yours for the next 15 minutes.
Great. Thanks so much, Janet. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks to the members of the Program Planning Committee and everybody at the Women's City Club for all you do, but also for this special attention on just a very important topic for our community, for our nation. And thanks everybody for taking time out to be here. Great crowd to be a part of. So at Catholic Charity Southwestern Ohio, we serve and empower people through God's love in their times of vulnerability. And we do this through a wide range of local services that engage the community in solidarity. Last year, we worked with almost 20,000 people from all across the age spectrum, from early childhood to older adult years, from backgrounds and faiths all over the world. And one of the populations that we feel called and blessed to work with consistently are migrants and refugees. And this has been a part of the work of Catholic Charities since its very founding in 1916. So it's really just an honor to be continuing to try to build bridges of solidarity with the new Americans coming to our community and helping them thrive. So, you know, Janet, you teed this up so well, I think, by describing the concern for the national rhetoric, the national political tensions all around the issue of immigrations. And so it's more important than ever that we realize that fundamentally this is not a political issue. This is a human issue.
Yes.
And for us at Catholic Charities, as I'm sure as many other organizations that are here, we know this. This is about the relationships that we have with everyday people who are trying to live the American dream like anybody else. And so it's a blessing to us, all our staff and the many, many volunteers that come through our agency and work with migrants themselves, and the migrants who come and end up working with us and serving with us to serve other migrants, that again and again, we see the American dream, that spirit of industry and entrepreneurship and hope just always coming forward. And it's always a sign of hope to be with migrants and try to accompany them on their journeys. You know, I think of the many communities that we've worked with for many years who are now just strongly established in the Cincinnati area. I think of the Bhutanese community, for instance, that are predominantly in the Coleraine and surrounding areas that just now are thriving and contributing so much civically and socially and economically to the community. Many of our Latino communities, same stories. So I think the future of Cincinnati and our greater Cincinnati area just needs to continually be to welcome and help migrants weave into the tapestry of our beautiful life here. So to share a little bit about Catholic Charities, you know, among our services for migrants are the Su Casa Hispanic Center, our refugee resettlement, our immigration legal services. We have what's called an Accuracy Now interpretation services that provides interpretation in over 100 different languages. And we have a multilingual mental health program here. So we really try to provide some comprehensive support for migrants. And we do this, of course, in concert with so many other awesome agencies and faith communities and community groups in the area, many of which are represented here, to try to provide a spectrum of support. I want to start just by saying, as we talk about our immigrant neighbors, it's important to understand some basic distinctions and definitions. So for those who might not already know this, I do want to first start off by explaining specifically what a refugee is versus in the broader migrant community. And a refugee specifically has been recognized by the United Nations on High Commission on Refugees, and then by our own U.S. State Department, to be legally and formally resettled here and to receive organized support for that resettlement. And a refugee has to prove that they've been forced from their country with a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. Most refugees have languished in refugee camps for many, many, many years before they ever come to a new country to be formally resettled moving forward. But that's important to talk about because we use the term often interchangeably, but it's a very specific term. And they represent in general kind of a small minority of all the migrants that in general are in our area. But at Catholic Charities, why that definition is also very important to us is that we are the single officially recognized agency by the U.S. State Department for Southwest Ohio for resettling those refugee families. Last year, we settled about 300 refugees, and as well as Afghan evacuees from when the Afghans had to flee about 2 years ago, as well as Ukrainians who are coming into the Cincinnati area and looking for support. Besides the Afghanistan and Ukrainians, we're receiving refugees from 14 other countries. Probably the greatest numbers are coming from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Syria, and Eritrea. So those are the largest populations that we're seeing through that particular program. And I hope in just what I share in this brief time, at least just gives you kind of a glimpse of the overall immigration picture that we see through our services. So this program is rapidly growing. We anticipate serving twice as many refugees this year that we did last year. So that's a wonderful thing that I think more resources are being poured into this. But you know, it also means that we all have work to do to welcome and support these families. So beyond the formal refugee program, then are many other migrants coming from all other places in the world. So again, at Catholic Charities, what we see a lot of too are particularly migrants from the Hispanic community that we serve through our Su Casa Hispanic Center and our Immigration Legal Services and our mental health program. So we served over 2,000 households last year from the countries in Latin and South America. The vast majority of Hispanic immigrants that we see in our region come from Guatemala. And we also see a number come from Nicaragua, Honduras, and Mexico. But predominantly in the Cincinnati area, we see a lot of Guatemalans. What we're also seeing is a significant increase in the number of Venezuelans as well. And I would say that it's really, for the Nicaraguans and the Venezuelans, it's so much related to the turmoil in their home countries, the political chaos that's going on there. That's a major push factor for those populations that hasn't traditionally been the case. So they come here truly fleeing for their lives in many ways. We provide our clients emergency assistance, case management support, English as a second language, health promotion, and also many of you may have heard of the MARC ID. It's a third-party issued identification that we provide to help provide some sense of identification for those who otherwise don't have access to it. And we do this in partnership with the Metropolitan Area Religious Coalition of Cincinnati. We also work with a couple hundred unaccompanied children. So we've all probably heard about in the news, at least, if not elsewhere, of the children who come here without parents or other guardians, usually to the southern border. And see, these are some of the most vulnerable migrants coming into our community. And when those unaccompanied children are referred to Cincinnati by the U.S. government from the shelters at the border, many of them will get paired with a relative or some sort of relation so that they can have some sort of house setting while their asylum case is being processed. So we provide case management and support for those kids. And first and foremost, we want to make sure that these kids aren't becoming victims of human trafficking. And this is a huge problem across the country. I think we've seen some really heinous stories of kids being exploited for labor and sex trafficking. So we try to provide services to make sure that that's not the case for kids that we are assigned under our care. Thankfully, the U.S. government is increasing this as a priority, so we anticipate having more of these kinds of kids on our caseload to help protect them. I also want to make a note that we're also seeing an increase in West Africans in our greater Cincinnati area, particularly from the country of Mauritania. And this presents new opportunities and new challenges. And so I think we're working in concert with a number of community groups and how we can provide some more services for this community. Very briefly, you know, migrants are resettling all over in our community and helping revitalize many of our neighborhoods. Some of the areas, you know, if you wanted to overgeneralize, you could say many of them are Hispanic neighbors that we see are in Carthage, East Price Hills, Springdale, Hamilton. Where Congolese and Eritreans are resettling a lot in Westwood in the Western Hills area. We have a number of Afghans and Syrians in Westchester, Ukrainians in Milford and Loveland, Mauritanians in the Lockland area and other surrounding communities. And as I mentioned before, a lot of Bhutanese in the Coleraine area. So that's just to give you a very broad picture of kind of the tapestry in our community. I want to end, and then we can talk more in the Q&A if there's more specific questions. Just maybe a couple ideas about how we're continuing to look for community relationships and support in this work. Something new that we're doing much more intentionally, and invite any of you who are part of faith community or community group is what we're calling a co-sponsorship model with our refugee families to basically partner with us in the work of helping resettle families and accompany us in our work to provide the breadth of services that we want to provide to our families. I'll put in the chat some contact information if anybody's interested in getting involved with that. We're also in need of just volunteer labor, furniture movers, people to help drive as we resettle these new families. And you can find out more on our website, which I'll put in the chat as well. And lastly, bilingual in Spanish. We've got plenty of opportunities to support our Su Casa clients through ESOL or just helping welcome our clients into our space. Please come talk to us if you're interested in any opportunities there. Great, thank you. You're on mute, Janet. Sorry.
Thank you. I forgot I muted myself. And that's a good reminder. If you're just joining us, please do mute yourselves also. I just want to chime in. I have not been a very active volunteer, but I have been able to contribute some things. Tony mentioned that they do the resettlement, and when they resettle, they put together an entire house or apartment for the new families. The volunteer who's in charge, the staff person in charge, showed me photos that she had of a house that they had prepared, down to stuffed animals on the beds for the children. And you feel like, I mean, try to imagine what it'd be like to leave your homeland with nothing but a suitcase with the clothes on your back, and you come here and someone gives you a furnished home. That's a really amazing thing. And it's easy enough if those of us who are starting to downsize, if we have things that we don't need anymore, Tony's organization is happy to have them, and you can call them and arrange to do that. I did forget to mention in the beginning about using chat. We do encourage you to use the chat throughout our program to put any questions you might have in, so you don't have to remember them for later, and we'll try to get to all those in the Q&A. But any comments or any information or questions you have, please do feel free to use the chat. Okay, so our next speaker is Samantha Searles, who is the program director for Ignite Peace, and through that she coordinates the Immigrant Dignity Coalition. And Samantha, I'm going to let you tell your story because you do it much better than I will.
Thank you, Janet. I'm actually going to share some slides and share my screen, just because that's just how my brain works. Good evening, everyone. My name is Samantha Searles. My pronouns are she and her. And you might have seen a brown little blob going in and out of my camera, and that is my cat, Minnie, who is very upset that we are not cuddling on the couch right now. So she and her tail might make an appearance. But to tell you a little bit about my organization before I get into the work that I do with the Immigrant Dignity Coalition, I work for Ignite Peace, a small nonprofit located in Over the Rhine inside the Peasley Neighborhood Center. We actually just went through a rebranding, so some of you might know us as IJPC, the Intercommunity Justice and Peace Center. And we went through this rebranding because we really want to refocus our work on peace building. So our mission is essentially the same. We educate and advocate for peace, challenge unjust systems, and promote the creation of a nonviolent society. But the change that we are specifically making over the next few years is to really focus on a framework of nonviolence and anti-racism across all of our programs. And we want to use the issues of criminal justice and immigration justice as spaces for people to practice peace building in our community. So that really kind of explains how we addressed issues. And unlike Catholic Charities, we are not a direct service organization. We're more of an advocacy group. And so I rely heavily on Tony and on Brian to learn about issues that are affecting the immigrant community to help inform our advocacy work. And I'll give you examples of that as we move on. But in my role as program director, I run our immigration justice program and also do some work with nonviolence and anti-racism. And I recognize a few of you from our Rethinking Racism docu-series that we are putting on currently. So please check out our website for more information about that program. But we really focus on education. We want to let the public know what the issues are and how and what people can do about them. And so we host interactive events, presentations, and lead discussions. You can see pictures here. We have an interactive board game that simulates the immigrant experience. If any of you would be interested in kind of learning a lot about immigration really quickly, and it's also kind of fun. And then on the picture on the right is one of our tabling events at the Freedom Center, where we asked participants, what does home feel like? Because that's a really crucial to a lot of the work that we do, is to help new Cincinnatians build a home. The second part of my job is advocacy, and we do talk to our legislators. We do direct lobbying and have meetings with decision makers, and bring folks with us who have lived experience of these issues. And then we also do grassroots lobbying, which is activating the public to take action. And don't you worry, I'm going to give you some homework by the time I end my presentation. And occasionally we host rallies, protests, and vigils to raise public awareness about issues affecting our community. The photo on the bottom left is a picture of some of our interns and myself outside City Hall when we were testifying in front of City Council about the need for more affordable housing in Cincinnati. The photo on the right is from the summer of rallies. I can't remember what year it was exactly, with one of our leaders in the front, rallying up the crowd. I believe that rally was about ending family separation at the border. And then the biggest piece of what I do is coalition building. You could be wondering, what is this white lady doing running an immigration program? And that's a really good question. And so I recognize my positionality and my power and my privilege. And so in order to do this work authentically, because I do not have lived experience, my closest relatives who are immigrants are at least 4 generations back. And so to build these authentic relationships, we work with other organizations to inform the community about what's going on, to connect each other, to solve problems together, and to take action and mobilize. So we do this through the Immigrant Dignity Coalition. It is an organization, or it is a coalition of 42 different organizations in the greater Cincinnati area. And we meet once a month just to share information and to work together and to take action. So the photo on the left is one of the meetings that we've had at the Clifton Mosque. And the photo on the right is a more recent meeting we've had at Mount Auburn Presbyterian Church. And so just to tell you a little bit more about the coalition, our purpose is to inform, connect, and mobilize the Southwest Ohio and Northern Kentucky community to defend and protect the dignity of the immigrant and refugee community by working in partnership with one another. This coalition was founded December of 2016 in the expectation that the incoming Trump administration would create a lot of challenges for our immigrant community. So we wanted to get organized, and we've been organizing ever since, because in some ways things have gotten better under President Biden, and in other ways things are still very, very hard. And so just to kind of break down the mission a little bit more with our 3 terms. Through the coalition, we communicate issues facing the local community. We learn about policy proposals and changes to immigration programs. We hear updates about new events, trainings, and initiatives that people can get involved in. In terms of connecting, we put teams together to work on solving problems that the community is experiencing. We give ways for people to plug into existing campaigns and efforts to create change, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And we also give folks opportunities to lead and volunteer and donate. And then most importantly, we mobilize all of our networks, 42 organizations. That's a lot of power. So we want to activate our networks when there is a moment to show up and show out, and to be public, and to move folks into action. So we move from talk into action. So in the spirit of the coalition, I'm going to inform, connect, and mobilize you right now. And want to tell you some things that we've been working on in the coalition and at Ignite Peace. So in the category of inform, one of the things I want to tell you about is Ignite Peace's campaign for fair housing for immigrants. Housing is the #1 issue that comes up in coalition meetings. And Brian and Tony will tell you that that is probably, if not the #1 issue, one of the top issues their agencies are facing as well. Not only being able to find affordable housing because there just simply isn't enough housing stock to go around, but even to like when you find it to make sure it's a good quality and so that people who live there have a good quality of life. Unfortunately, we know in the immigrant community, they face a lot of discrimination, especially if they don't have an immigration status. And a lot of landlords don't know that they are allowed to rent to people who are undocumented. So there's a lot of great work happening in the community, trying to educate landlords, and then also tenants, so that people know their rights and know that if the heat gets turned off in the middle of winter, their landlord should be held accountable for that. And also any other kinds of code violations that challenge their quality of life. And then, of course, once we have a place for someone to stay, we want them to stay in it and to prevent evictions. We know rising rents and cost of living is an issue. And also in the immigrant community, there's the issue of informal evictions where someone has a month-to-month lease, so they don't necessarily go through the official eviction process, but end up getting locked out. And so if you want more information about fair housing issues, Ignite Peace put together an informal report of stories and surveys from 11 different organizations connected to the coalition. I didn't have the short link ready for you tonight, but I'm happy to share it if you'd like to read it. Also wanted to point out the image on the right is a campaign we did I think 2 years ago, where we tried to educate the community through conversations and relationship building. And so if you go back on our social media, you can actually hear audio clips of coalition members talking about issues that affect their community. All right, now I want to connect you. So there's lots of things to do to get involved. Tony gave you a laundry list of things you can do to help Catholic Charities, and there are a lot of other organizations out there that need your help. We put together a volunteer guide a few years back. You can see the short link on the screen. If you type that in to your web browser, it should take you to a volunteer guide put together by Ignite Peace. But connecting really is about taking initiative. If you see a need, fill a need. Offer to bring people together in a meeting to talk about what we can do to help. Organize events. Fundraise for different things, gather donations, give a ride to someone who needs to go to an appointment. The best leaders that I interact with in the coalition are leaders that take initiative and really know their skill set and what they bring to the table and offer it to see if it's helpful. And the last bit is to mobilize. And there are 2 legislative issues I want to make you aware of. Both of which I believe Representative Landsman might mention in his video remarks at the end of this panel. But Tony mentioned we have a large Mauritanian community. And if you're not familiar with the history of that country, it is quite heartbreaking, where thousands of Black men are facing slavery and human trafficking and ethnic cleansing. And while they seek asylum, we know that system is deeply flawed. And there is a program called TPS, Temporary Protected Status, that could help the Mauritanians immensely. So there is a bill that's been introduced by Representative Landsman last week, I believe. It's HR 7034. There's a complementary Senate bill by Senator Brown, Senate Bill 3618. It just got introduced, so please call your representatives to tell them to support it and to put it to a vote. It would help thousands of newly arrived Mauritanians living in our area. The second bit of advocacy I wanted to tell you about is you may have heard that the Senate has been working on a funding bill for foreign aid, including aid to Ukraine. But part of these negotiations, for some reason, immigration policies have been put on the table. And it's really unfortunate because immigration deserves to have its own conversation with decision makers and not piled into something highly politicized in the midst of an election. And some of the proposals on the table would gut our asylum program, would make it a million times harder to get asylum, even though there are legal pathways to access that relief. It would make it even harder. And so we are encouraging people to call their representatives to save asylum and to have this conversation separate from the funding conversation. So the Capitol Switchboard number is on your screen. If you take 2 minutes tomorrow, they will connect you to your representative, and you can tell them that we need to save asylum. Another example of campaigns that we've done in the past is here on the right. We ran a social media campaign in 2021 where each week in the summer, we highlighted a new population that needs access to citizenship in greater Cincinnati. So again, if you go back on our social media and look for the yellow squares, you can read about all the people on your screen and why their families need access to citizenship. It is definitely something our community needs. I invite you to get involved with the Immigrant Dignity Coalition. We have meetings the fourth Wednesday of the month. We just met yesterday from 6:30 to 8 at Mount Auburn Presbyterian Church. We also have a hybrid option because we realize that has expanded who's been able to be involved in our coalition. And our next meeting is February 28th. So if you send me an email, I'll make sure you get on the list and you get all the information. There's also a link at the bottom to our website that gives you more information about the coalition if your organization wants to join. We also have a pretty active Facebook group that you can get involved in and get the latest information. And lastly, I hope you stay in touch with me and Ignite Peace. My email is up there, as well as my work cell phone, a QR code for our email list, and our social media. So with that, I am finished, Ms. Janet.
Wow. Wow. I loved hearing what you were saying about the approach women's is to engage. And everything we've heard so far from Tony's presentation, Samantha's presentation, says that we are not helpless when it comes to local things. We can do things. We can make those phone calls. We can volunteer. There are so many ways, whatever your talent or your availability or your interest are. You have heard such a wonderful array of ways that you can do something positive. And all of us can pick up our phone and call 202-224-3121 tomorrow and tell people to vote for HR 7034. And that's a good start. So I'm feeling encouraged that we can be empowered. So thank you for that wonderful presentation, Samantha. Our next speaker is Brian Wright, who is the Executive Director of Cincinnati Compass. And Brian, I'm going to confess my own ignorance. I did not know anything about your organization until we started putting this panel together and I started going through all the online things. So I'm really curious. I hope others are less ignorant than I am and better informed, but I'm really looking forward to everything you can tell us about your agency, because you have another unique role in the story of how we help our immigrants and our refugees feel at home in our community. So Brian, floor is yours.
No, thank you, Janet, and thank you, Susan, for the invitation to come and speak. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces and meet some new folks. We are somewhat public, but we are do a lot of behind the scenes work. And so similar to Ignite Peace, we're not a social service provider, but we are a trusted connector in the community and are a convener and a catalyst. And so where there are gaps, we're able to convene groups to mobilize and help to bring changes to the systems and such. So I'll be able to talk a little bit about what we do. You've heard some data from Tony. I'm going to add a little bit more data to that, and then I'm going to share some slides, and I'll be able to share this afterwards because eventually your eyes might glaze over at 8 o'clock at night. But I'm happy to share the data because what we want to do, and as you've heard from Tony and Samantha, is really to create a really strong welcoming infrastructure in the Cincinnati region. So no matter where the point of entry is, people feel a sense of connection and belonging, and they feel welcomed. So whether they're coming through a refugee resettlement agency, they're coming through a Fortune 500 company, they've arrived at the southern border and made their way to Cincinnati or Covington or Mason, Westwood, that they have and are connected to family members, that they have access to resources to be able to thrive in the region and feel safe and welcome. So I will also share my screen if it's okay. And if you have trouble saying, just please let me know. So as I said, we'll just cover really three quick things about who we are, Cincinnati Compass, share some data, and then some kind of action items afterwards, and happy to answer questions along the way. So I'm also joined here tonight by Jane Wendy. She's the program director of Cincinnati Compass. And so we're actually an initiative that came out of the previous mayor's task force on immigration. So there were 5 subcommittees of about 100 people around the city and region. And then there was a recommendation of a creation of some kind of center to help coordinate efforts. And so we're actually a partnership with the city of Cincinnati, and we're based out of the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber. And we work with about 65 partner organizations across the region. And we work with immigrant and refugee communities to build social, civic, and economic power. Everything we do is community driven. It has to be. It makes no sense to come from us. It has to come from the community members. And so we're able to elevate voices in a variety of ways. And so we get asked to do a lot of things. As Tony and Samantha shared, there's a lot of things going on. But we've narrowed our focus to 3 key areas to focus on workforce development, small business development, entrepreneurship, and civic engagement. Now, we cannot talk about workforce without also talk about housing and also mental health and health in general. And that's woven through all aspects of this work. So we also are engaged in that. In the top right corner, you'll see the kind of areas. So we always talk about the levels that we work at. So we work at that community level to connect people to resources, and we connect people to each other and connect people to like organizations to each other to help capacity build so that immigrant-led organizations can have a stronger capacity to bring resources to community members, but also to elevate the voices to shape policies and practices. We then work with providers to make sure that those services are visible and accessible to community members, was providing culturally and linguistically appropriate services. So if someone is in need of some workforce development training, if they go to, say, a Cincinnati State or go to Ohio Means Jobs, that they have the culturally and linguistically appropriate resources to be able to get the training that they need, for example. So we work at the community level to connect people to resources and to each other. We then work with the providers to make sure that those services are visible and accessible to community members. We work with employers to make sure that they have inclusive recruitment, hiring, onboarding, and retention practices. And then we also do policy work, and I'll share more about that at the end. So you'll see there's a thread that's woven directly from the community members to policy change. And that's where a lot of our civic engagement work is really powerful. And so we have 2 groups one's called Civic Action for Refugee Empowerment, CARE Cincinnati. And out of that spun a group, a Compass Community Council. And that consists of about 22 country and ethnic community-based organizations in the Cincinnati region, like the Mauritanian Friendship Association, the Nepali Language and Arts Center, and Tara, I saw that you're here tonight, the Cameroon Family of Cincinnati, and others. And we work with those community-based organizations to be a platform to elevate their voices around the needs and then the assets that they bring to address the questions. Because we feel that the people that are most impacted should be at the decision-making table around the policy and practices that affect their lives. So really, again, it's these kind of 3 areas around, again, workforce development to help people gain access to employment, start businesses, and then really to broaden the bench of representation to immigrants and refugees and decision-making entities. And Tony kind of touched on this earlier about how people arrive here. So some arrive through the refugee resettlement process, so through humanitarian, and I'll put in the chat a really good guide by the American Immigration Council, like how the U.S. immigration system works, or doesn't. We know it's a broken system and there hasn't been any reform in the last 30 years. And we know, like, in the last 30 years, we've had the Internet of Things, AI and machine learning. We have a very outdated immigration system, right? That is not very that does not center the humanity and dignity of people coming to our borders. So people come for economic reasons, for family reunification, come for employment. And so you'll see that there's family-based migration, humanitarian-based refugee resettlement, asylum applications, and then employment. And so you'll see here the vast diversity of immigrants and refugees that come to the region. So I'll step back and say, so Cincinnati Compass, we're based out of Cincinnati, but we cover the Cincinnati metro region. So Northern Kentucky, Southwest Ohio, and Southeast Indiana. And we do a lot of state level work as well through groups that we've created, like Vibrant Ohio, Ohio Business for Immigration Solutions, and others. And so you'll see that, and these are annual, and when you're looking at this data, this is metro area in the Cincinnati region. So actually the largest immigrant population in the Cincinnati region is from Asia, largely India, China, the Philippines, Vietnam. And then also from, as Tony mentioned, there's a growing West African community. So we have a very fast growing West African community from Mauritania, from Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, Senegal, and then Central American, Mexico, though it's in North America, is counted as Central America for census purposes. And so we're seeing a continued growth in communities from Guatemala and Mexico, El Salvador, and then South America like Venezuela. And so often we hear very negative stories about immigrants coming to the United States, taking our jobs and such. But we know that immigrants and refugees are job creators and are deeply woven into the cultural and economic fabrics of our region. We have 5 Fortune 500 companies here in the region. 3 of them were started by immigrants. So there's a long history of immigrant and economic impact here in the region. And you'll see in the bottom left of immigrants have a household income of about $4.1 billion, contributing $385.7 million in state and local taxes, with a total spending power that can be reinvested of $2.9 billion back into the economy. So we know that there is a lot of economic power. Yes, there are challenges, but yes, people are also deeply impacting in positive ways our economy. And you'll see, and we know that immigrants are hesitant to complete the census. There was a huge chilling effect in the last census gathering of data. So according to the census, it's around 6% in the region. But Deloitte has an initiative called Data USA with MIT, and they estimate it's around 10%. We think that's a little bit more accurate. And again, I can share these slides over. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm happy to share this. And just draw your attention to the right. About 47%, or almost half, of immigrants in the region are now naturalized U.S. citizens, and 30% come from outside the U.S. and other parts, and about 21% come from other parts of the U.S. 30% come from outside of the U.S. About 21% come from inside the U.S. and the remainder, about half, come from other parts of Ohio. And you'll see that 48% of immigrants have a bachelor's degree or higher, but they're underemployed. So when we talk about jobs and entry-level jobs, we might find that it's the very stereotypical thing of, the Uber driver who is a doctor, right? So we know that 48% have a bachelor's degree or higher, but they're underemployed. But also we have 20% that have less than a high school diploma. So that's why a lot of our work focuses on workforce development, small business development. Because what happens is, a lot of times immigrants and refugees have barriers to mainstream employment, so they turn to entrepreneurship. And we see that with other communities as well. And also, and Tony did a good job of using differentiating the terminology, which I really appreciate, to understand that the different ways that people arrive. And so we see that there is and under the category here of refugees, that also includes asylum seekers as well. And you'll see DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and then also the undocumented community. We also hear that undocumented community members are not paying taxes, but we know that's not true. And in Ohio, you'll see that undocumented community members are paying around 117 million in state and local taxes in Ohio, and then about 48 million in Kentucky as well. So again, you'll see a common thread that I'm sharing here, that people are, and also when immigrants are paying into things like Social Security, or they're not allowed, they don't have access to those services, so they're paying into things that we benefit from, so they're subsidizing our care in ways, and are not being fully viewed as a full resident or human being in our policies and practices. So this might be a little bit small to see, and I can share this data afterwards, but these are the top 5 countries that are represented in the region, and also the the zip codes in the cities in which they live. So India is number 1, then China, then the Philippines, then Mexico and Guatemala. And you'll see, sorry, no, left, right, sorry, it's late, it's 8 o'clock. But you'll see and this should not be a surprise to anyone, but seeing how individuals from Mexico are living in Hamilton, Florence, Kentucky, Mainville, Ohio, Fairfield, and Mason. And you'll see this with the community from Guatemala, Covington, East Price Hill, Florence, and then Avondale, Paddock Hills, and then Carthage. And then I can share this with the top 15 countries that are represented in the region to share with you. And here you'll see, and this should be no surprise either, this is the share of the foreign-born residents and the change that we've seen in the last 10 years. And again, I see people leaning in and squinting a little bit. I can share this afterwards. I was really surprised to see the village of Indian Hill come in at 15%. But then you'll see at other neighborhoods or cities like Forest Park, Mason, Oxford, Blue Ash. And these are there was a ranking of 100 cities of the foreign-born with the highest share of foreign-born populations in their cities. And you'll see that Cincinnati is 61. And we've heard the neighborhoods mentioned already. Westwood, the largest neighborhood in the city, has a large immigrant population, as do the Price Hills, and then Carthage as well. And so you'll see, and you might work here and live in some of these cities or townships. Another thing as well, looking at language other than English spoken in the home, should come as no surprise, but some of the cities you see here with Forest Park, Springdale, Fairfield, Mason, and to Norwood and Madeira. Last, I'll mention about international students again, because we talked about how people arrive in the United States, or particularly to the region. Ohio is always in the top 10 of receiving international students. And there's been large talk about international students coming to the United States and changing the F1 student program. But we see that, again, bringing international students strengthens our economy. Also, we know that diversity brings more innovation. And there's a financial contribution of about $858 million, creating about 9,000 jobs. So looking at, and I'll wrap up by talking about some of the state and federal immigration things that we're looking at, and some of you've already heard. Samantha mentioned the TPS for Mauritanians. Thank you to Representative Landsman. I know that Melissa's on the call, and to Senator Sherrod Brown. There's a lot more work to do, so we ask that you would call your local representatives to help advance this bill. There's been a lot more. Ohio is the home to the largest Mauritanian community in the United States, largely in central Ohio and southwestern Ohio, and increasingly in northern Kentucky. So a lot of work has been done by the Mauritanian Human Rights Network. Hule Chiam, who's based out of Columbus, has done a lot of good work around this, as well as locally with Mauritanian Friendship Network and others. Obviously, we're wrapped up in budget negotiations around funding of Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, and also the border negotiations. And Samantha touched on this and a call to action around Save Asylum. We know that asylum is a human right. It is international law codified by our Congress. And so we want to protect asylum. Also, there are several bills of looking to reduce the wait time for work authorizations, to be able to apply for work authorization from 90 days to 30 days. That is something that we're advocating for, and even something more immediate. In the bachelor's to master's and PhD level, of education. There's some proposed rule changes to the H-1B program for specialty occupations. The U.S. does not have a entrepreneurial visa as 35 other countries do. So as I mentioned with international students, if someone comes here and founds a company, there's no visa pathway for them to stay. And so we're looking to create a visa, entrepreneurial visa. And actually during with our small business work, we work with international founders leveraging the H-1B, but also work with individuals who come as accompanied minors, and even the undocumented population can legally start businesses. A lot of people do not know that, so we work with them to be able to start businesses. Visa backlogs is another thing. If you're coming from India, you might have a wait time of about 96 years to sponsor a family member to come here. So we're looking at the visa backlogs. Something that just came up today. On one side, it's being celebrated as a bipartisan bill for the child tax credit. But we've had some senators that have spoken out who the names would not be surprising to you as they come out frequently about anti-immigrant rhetoric. But there's a concern of blocking the child tax credit for children of undocumented parents. So as you know, children who are born in the U.S. Are U.S. citizens under the Constitution, 14th Amendment. So while they have access to those, to the child tax credit, undocumented parents do not. But there is a push to ban this, and this was just brought up today. So I think this would be a fairly new. We'll keep an eye on this and be able to provide some updates as it moves along. Locally, we're looking at in the state of Ohio and Kentucky at license and credential reform to help reduce barriers for internationally trained professionals, particularly in healthcare. We have an aging workforce across many industries. Job growth is outpacing population growth, so we have to find the talent from somewhere. And so as we see aging population with nursing and physicians, we want to help people trained in that field to be able to return and practice. We're looking to fund the State Office of Opportunities for New Americans, looking at tuition equity. What I mean by that is asylum seekers can go part-time with in-state tuition, but we're looking to see how people be able to go full-time with in-state tuition, have residency, and then driver's license for all, regardless of immigration status. That is we want people to be knowledgeable of the laws of driving in the United States. So we see this as a public health issue. And so that's another thing we're working on. So I will end there because that's a lot.
That is a lot. And Brian, I love all your statistics.
Janet, you're frozen.
You have blown holes in just about every stereotype that is, and I hope if that is an eye-opener for me, and I'm sure for many of us as well. When you mentioned about the driver's license, we're not able to have a speaker from Mark on tonight, but they've also gone to great lengths to establish an ID program. Do you deal with the Mark IDs with the people that you work with? The ID cards? Is that something you do?
We refer them to Catholic Charities and Mark.
Okay.
We encourage anyone to obtain the Mark ID because it provides opportunity for dignified relations with law enforcement. It provides access to certain services in the city, and actually not just the city of Cincinnati, but other municipalities around the region. So we do refer to Catholic Charities, and they keep us updated whenever there is a drive. I think there's talk about the Mauritanian community, and Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think about 60 Mauritanian individuals have obtained the ID in 23 and looking to expand that.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Yeah, we actually about 100 Mauritanians got the ID. We did our first drive, kind of a specific French-speaking Mark ID drive. And so this year we want to do that on a regular basis. We know the demand is there among West Africans and other French-speaking communities. So, our plan is as soon as possible, hopefully within the next 2 months at least, that we'll start rotating Spanish versions and French versions for the ID drive.
Mark could really use some help with French speakers. to come to the
Yes,
tribes.
with
we
French?
we could use a lot of folks who have fluency in French to help support that. That'll become a need. Thank you.
The other
Yeah.
thing that Catholic Charities was doing when I was volunteering there, they had driver's ed classes. And a wonderful guy from the Cincinnati Police Department came and taught the driver's ed. And I was impressed that Cincinnati Police also have cards that they can give out that an immigrant can have in their car that says why they're not responding. You know, I don't speak English that well. So it's sort of to warn the police officer of their situation.
No, that's good information. Thank you for sharing that, Jan. Wow. I mean, I feel so encouraged that there's so much good, positive things going on in our whole metropolitan area. And I know there's been a lot of information coming at you. We do have one more speaker, Greg Landsman, who again was not able to be with us tonight. He had another commitment. But Jeff, if you're ready to tee up the video with Congressman Landsman, he is our representative for the 1st District of Ohio. And some of the things that Brian mentioned and that Samantha mentioned, the House bills, he does talk about in his presentation.
Hey everyone, it's Greg Landsman. I am sorry that this is not live, but hopefully the next time I will be there with you all. I'm really glad that you're having this conversation. It's such an important conversation, and hopefully I can provide some good background in terms of what's happening at the federal level and what our office does as it relates to immigration and visas and passports and all those things. All right, before I dive into all of that, just some basic background, quick background on me for those of you who don't know me or don't know me that well. My wife and I, Sarah, live in Mount Washington on the east side of town. We have 2 children. Our son Elijah is 12 years old. He's in 6th grade at Sands. And our daughter Maddie is 13, almost 14, and she's at Walnut Hills. I was a teacher, my parents were teachers, I did child education advocacy work most of my career. That's where my passion is, children and families. I was part of this effort years ago to pass the Cincinnati Preschool Promise, making Cincinnati the first and still the only city to provide 2 years of quality preschool for 3 and 4-year-olds. Was at City Hall for 5 years, focused on core services, and all of these investments to improve lives for children and families, from housing stability, setting up the first ever eviction prevention fund, to massive increases in investments in youth jobs, pedestrian safety, a whole host of things. And then got elected to the United States Congress in 2022. So I've been a member of Congress for a year. And one of the things that we as my family and my team, we wanted to do was to really be a different kind of national leader. So at least for me, national leaders would get elected to national office, and far too often they would disappear, and or they would get pulled into these partisan fights. And so with 1 year under our belts, we have tried to be accountable and present. We've done town hall after town hall and making sure that we're constantly not just in the district but really involved in people's lives and their work, and we're helping, always helping, and we're fully transparent about what's happening in Congress. So I do like a vote recap every week, which you can watch on our social media pages. We also wanted to be bipartisan, like to avoid getting pulled into those big partisan fights that, end up with things that need to get done not getting done. So I joined a bunch of bipartisan groups, and I have tried to really work on issues that are bipartisan in nature, in large part because that's the kind of leader I think most people are looking for, but also in this divided Congress, it's the only way to get things done, and we're moving bills. We hope to pass several bills in this Congress that will help people. So those are the big things that we're trying to really do to be fully transparent and accountable, reliable, bipartisan, and as we start year 2, I'm optimistic. All right, so let me dive into the issue. So the issue of immigration and then the border, I'll talk about that too, but let's start with the casework, because we do a ton of casework. Each member of Congress has several staff members that are dedicated just to casework, and we do IRS casework, we do casework related to Medicare and Social Security, but we also do a lot of issues related to passports, visas, immigration issues in general. We have a full-time person. So one of the things that I hope people take away is that if there is an immigration issue, you have a passport issue, anything to do with customs and immigration, the State Department, we can help. A lot of times folks will hit a roadblock, or they're about to take a trip and their passport expired. You can come to us and we are here to help. So that's one big takeaway. All right, let's jump in. The first thing is what we do for individuals. We do a ton of casework. So that's IRS casework, issues related to Social Security or Medicare, but also passport, immigration related issues. And so we have multiple people on our staff that just help people navigate through various federal departments, agencies, and it does make a big difference to have somebody on your side as you're making these phone calls, filling out paperwork, so on and so forth. So please, if you have any issues at all that you think we can help with, please call us. And it's something that we take very seriously. We want to be very good, if not great, at casework, that we are a reliable office. When you call us, you have a very friendly person who's incredibly helpful and determined to make things happen. So we do get a ton of passport requests. People are about to go on a trip, their passport expired, and they call us and we help. So don't forget, we're here to help on passport related issues. Now, immigration related issues are obviously more complicated, and we do a ton of immigration related issues. Some of them are basic visa issues where somebody is struggling to get a visa, or there's some paperwork hangups. We help with that. Some are more complicated immigration cases that can take months, but there are also a lot of success stories, stories that we really love telling. We helped a family get out of Haiti. They were literally running for their lives, and now they're here safe. And there's another story of a family that got reunited. His wife was in Germany and just couldn't get here, and finally we were able to bring her to the United States. And so there's a ton of those kinds of immigration cases that we take on, and it's very important because it affects people's lives. The larger issue of immigration reform and the border is something that hopefully this Congress is going to take up. So as you probably have seen, the Senate, Republicans and Democrats have been negotiating a border security immigration reform bill that would be part of a larger emergency assistance package. And the sticking points have to do with funding, how much money will be available for our allies in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East, but also the border, and what kind of reform will go with it that will get the kind of bipartisan support we need in the Senate and in the House. I'm part of a group of House members that have been privy to those conversations in the hopes that when we get to a deal, hopefully we get to a deal, we can find enough Democrats and Republicans to ensure that if the Speaker brings us the bill, it passes. So the bipartisan agreement, without getting into a ton of details, there are two big pieces. One has to do with funding, and the other has to do with the asylum process, really the definition, and then what is required in order to meet that definition. So on the funding side, you're talking about the need for more border security officers. It's a big border. This is really the southern border, but you could make the argument that this is something that we need to work on across the board. It means also, and perhaps most importantly, more judges. And so, if somebody knows that their case, their asylum case, is going to take months, not years, they are more likely to stay home and work that case from the comfort of their own home, as opposed to traveling through Central America, Mexico, getting to the border, having to sleep in a tent, be in a detention facility, get a bus to Chicago or Denver, and then be stuck in some gymnasium or at the airport. If they know it's going to take years, which is the case now because we just don't have enough judges, then they're more likely to make that trip. And the current situation, I would argue, is very inhumane, because you have all these people coming only to get stuck out in the desert or in a detention center or shipped somewhere, and if they don't ultimately get the asylum, they got to go all the way back. So if you increase the number of judges dramatically, which this funding bill would do, you can take the asylum process from years to months, at which point fewer and fewer people will come. They'll stay home and do it as others do, which is over the phone, sending in their paperwork, or showing up somewhere in their country as they seek asylum. The other funding issue has to do with technology, and of course some people want more wall, but it's a long border, so the technology and the personnel is really where the vast majority of people are. That's sort of the common sense, common ground. On the asylum side, it really has to do with this issue of what is a credible threat. Right now, the credible threat threshold isn't that high, and the process doesn't require a ton of proof that there is a credible threat, that you're fleeing from some, really dangerous, awful, potentially deadly situation. The new asylum rules that are being discussed would raise that credible threat threshold and require the kind of proof that we do as it relates to other countries. And there's bipartisan support for that, again, because if people know that they're going to have to, prove, like they do in other countries or a lot of countries, this credible threat, they will most likely do it in their own country, as opposed to this really long trip that a lot of people are taking through South America, Central America, and Mexico to get to the border, to sleep in a tent, to be in a detention facility. All of these, what I would argue, are really inhumane situations for people. So that is the big asylum-related question, which is Congress going to change the threshold on the credible threat and the requirements? And I'm very supportive of that. I think most Democrats and Republicans appreciate that is going to be part of how we solve this problem and have a more structured, disciplined, and reliable process at the southern border. So if the Senate gets to an agreement and the Senate passes that agreement, will the House take it up? And that's on the Speaker. The Speaker has to determine whether or not he is going to bring it to the floor for a vote. I believe there is a bipartisan majority in the United States Congress that will support a bipartisan agreement on the border and on funding for Ukraine and Israel and Gaza and a whole host of other critically important emergency or national security issues. And if the Speaker doesn't, there is another vehicle, which is the discharge petition vehicle, requiring 218 members of Congress to say, we want to vote on this. Is that possible? Yes. Is it likely? I don't know. but there are two options in terms of getting this on the floor and getting it up for a vote. In terms of timing, this is all going to play out in the next couple of months, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Okay, so I'm not going to be there for the Q&A. I'm going to try to do rapid Q&A. These are just frequently asked questions. Here we go. Number one is, how do people apply right now to come to the United States? There are two primarily. One is work-based, right? This is the green card. You do that through your employer. And we work with employers and individuals that are trying to get here or stay here on a work visa. All right, the second one has to do with asylum or temporary protected status. We designate, the federal government designates temporary protected status for those countries or individuals from countries where there is real danger. I mean, just clearly serious danger, whether it's Haiti or Afghanistan. We just introduced a bill with Senator Sherrod Brown and Columbus members of Congress, Joyce Beatty and Mike Carey, on creating temporary protected status for Mauritanians here in the United States. There are several thousand in Cincinnati. And once you have temporary protective status and you're here, you can stay here for the 18 months that it lasts, and that allows you to not have to worry about being deported, and you can start working. And typically, until the threat goes away, those temporary protective status rules are extended. In addition to temporary protective status, there's the asylum seeking folks. Again, you either got to be here, or, as I mentioned, you can go to an office in other countries. We're seeing that in more and more countries. And the question is, what is that credible threat, and what are the requirements to prove that credible threat? And that's part of the big discussion in terms of how to deal with the issues at the southern border. Are there quotas? It depends on the country, but yes, for a lot of countries there are a certain number of people that can come each year, and that has to do with just having a manageable, structured immigration process. Now, for those countries where there is a temporary protective status order, there are no quotas. One last one. What about refugees? This is something that I'm more intimately familiar with because several years ago, our family got involved in helping refugees from Afghanistan. We helped one family, and then we started helping others, and it was and has become something that we continue to do as a family. The refugee situation is a little bit different. Countries that have a whole host of awful things happening, those individuals can get refugee status here in the United States because going home or staying there is absolutely just too dangerous. What makes the refugee piece different? Part of it is that it's typically a resettlement program, meaning the refugee is part of a refugee resettlement program from this country or that country. When we were getting involved or helping folks, it was part of the Afghanistan refugee resettlement program. All right, thanks for having me. Please reach out anytime. You can call the office. You can also just email me directly. It's just greglandsman1@gmail.com. You can call me. I really do want to be as reliable and accessible as humanly possible. One of the reasons why I ran is because I want this part of the country to have a member of Congress that's theirs, that is there for them when they need them. So please reach out, and hope to see you all soon.
We thank Greg for being part of our program. I know he went to a lot of trouble to make that video and get it to us, and we're grateful for all his input. One of the questions that came up in chat earlier, someone asked, how do you support the services that, financially, how do you support the services that are offered, the casework services? And Melissa, when Greg talked about a friendly, determined person, was he talking about you? Because you mentioned that you are a caseworker for his office.
Yes, I am.
So you're the friendly, determined. Yeah, you're the friendly, determined person he mentioned. So how are you funded? That was a question somebody asked in chat. How are the caseworker services funded?
the funding is, we get paid through the federal government, like through the budget of the office of the congressman. But I think they were
Okay.
talking about funding for, I don't know if they were talking about funding from us, though. I thought that was for a previous organization.
I thought it meant how it's the question was how are your services, how do you support your services financially?
I think it was for Catholic Charities.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
thought too.
Oh, okay. I misconstrued. Well, then Catholic Charities, do you want to say how do you support your services financially?
Sure. So it depends on the service. Within our refugee resettlement program, that's a formal partnership, an actual agreement with the U.S. government. So we do receive government support from that we then supplement with private donations, United Way support, whatever we can pull together, to make the whole program work comprehensively. With our work with unaccompanied children, also that's via contract so that we could provide those case management services with the Department of Homeland Security. So we work with the government on that. For all our other services, predominantly our emergency assistance or ESOL or case management, just outside of what I just mentioned, almost all of it is just private support, great community partnerships, and whatever we can pull together. So we appreciate everybody's support.
And if anyone on this call, anybody on this call is most welcome to support in any way you can. An easy question for Samantha. Someone asked, how do you get to play the Immigrant board game? And I'm curious to know how many people can play at one time. Because I've had an idea about doing something with that.
Yeah, well, I had multiple board games. I think I have 10, and they all have 5 players each. So I could do the game for about 50 people. If we ever wanted to get a group together and play the game. It usually goes in the midst of our Immigration 101 presentation that goes over green cards and visas and DACA and all of that. And usually is paired with an immigration story from somebody local. So if you want an Immigration 101, just send me an email and we will set something up.
And that's how you get to play the game, folks. So that was an easy one. Another question, and this is open to whoever can answer it, are what are the bills that deal with the decreasing the time to get your green card or your driver's license? And Brian posted in chat that would be the EAGLE Act. And I don't know if you call it the IVES Act or if you call it the IVES Act. But are those the two bills that deal with these, getting the time frame to be lessened, Brian? And are there other bills that we should specifically know about and try to lobby for?
Those are the two. There's one in the Senate, the EAGLE Act, the Equal Access to Green Cards for Legal Employment. And then the other one is the IVES Act. It's the Immigrant Visa Efficiency and Security Act, and that's in the House. And so they kind of mirror each other, and were introduced in this session. And it's to eliminate Congressman Landsman talked about caps and quotas, and so both of them propose to eliminate the cap for employment-based visas and for family-based visas to change the quote from 7% to 15%. So and I put a link in forward.us has a really good summary of both of those bills and why it's important to address this.
Great, thank you. Susan had a question about, Greg mentioned in his presentation about needing to prove creditable threat. And the question is, how do you prove a credible threat? Does anybody want to answer that one?
I'll start it off, and then Tony, if you want to hop on with your experience. I was very interested in Congressman Landsman's presentation. I really want to engage him on some of the things that he said, because proving asylum is already quite difficult. And the compensation to make that harder is quite disappointing. And that kind of speaks to what I mentioned earlier about these negotiations changing the asylum program. And that is one of the changes that I personally do not support. We need to make things easier, not harder. And for example, the Mauritanian community that is now having an opportunity through this bill that would give them TPS, they really need asylum. But the asylum program is so backed up and is so difficult to prove that they can't access asylum as they should. And so TPS is a stopgap solution. So while I'm grateful that the Mauritanian community has this opportunity, what would be better is if we made our asylum system more accessible to people who really are in danger. Yeah, so Tony, I don't know if we want to talk about the current way that people prove asylum, but I did want to mention that before we wrapped up.
Thank you for that. Tony, do you want to respond?
Sure. I think what you said, Samantha, is I would echo approving asylum is extremely difficult. I mean, these cases are years long. It is not an easy process.
Right.
And I think, we've always advocated the position of the U.S. Catholic bishops, which I think has echoed many faith communities and other groups around the country, that the problem with the system is just too few legal avenues to ultimately get here. And I think the asylum process is one that, at least in our experience, has been very difficult to get through. I did see in the chat too a recognition of the Cleveland Court, which is the Department of Justice court that is in our jurisdiction. So our attorneys go up there with their cases, and it does have a much higher rejection rate than other courts around the country. So all I could say, just from our experience, is it's very difficult. And so, when it comes to the specifics, this is where I would defer to our attorneys. I don't want to get too far down that road of what's the legal requirements are for that. But again, all I know is that it's a very difficult and long process, and I was surprised to hear that.
I was shocked because I didn't understand what Greg was saying. If people are in danger, as the Mauritanians are, and have to leave their country because of that danger, how do they then decide that they'll stay in their country and apply for asylum? I mean, that didn't make sense to me. They got to leave.
It's a challenge, Jan. There's probably no good answer to that question. So let that stand as a statement. There was another question in chat that I want to bring up. I know that Brian showed us the statistics about which groups from various countries had the largest population here. And I was not really surprised to learn that we had a larger Asian population than we do people from Central America. But the question being asked is, has Cincinnati in the past year seen an influx of immigrants from the southern border area? Are we being impacted by that? And I don't know, Brian, can you answer that one, or can somebody else answer that?
I can start, and then I imagine and defer to Tony and Samantha.
Okay.
On a general statement, the Midwest and particularly Cincinnati had seen a population decline for years, and we're starting to see slow and modest population growth. But at least we're seeing growth, and all of that is due to immigrants and refugees coming to our region. Why is that important? It's a stronger tax base. Diversity drives innovation. We have an aging workforce. Job growth is outpacing population growth. So in general, more immigrants and refugees are coming to the Cincinnati region already. From, as I shared earlier, like from outside the U.S., but then coming up through the southern border. Particularly from this summer, the Mauritanian community, which there's kind of two groups, right? There's a group of Mauritanians who arrived in the late 80s, early 90s. And then there's a more recent group that is arriving, and they're traveling to Brazil and Venezuela and coming up through the South America and Central America and presenting themselves at the southern border and applying for asylum. So we're seeing a large increase of Mauritanian community members, as well as Haitian community members, folks from Uzbekistan. And you'll hear in the media, you also hear that like people coming to the southern border is far more diverse than what it's historically been. There's recent data that shows that Venezuelans are outnumbering Mexicans as far for numbers of encounters at the border, which is the first time in history.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a shift in who's presenting themselves at the southern border, and we're also seeing that shift represented here in the Cincinnati region.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to comment on that?
I would echo Brian's assessment there. That's what we're seeing, I think, more in our clientele as well. As I mentioned, more Venezuelans, or people making more dangerous journeys from South America through Latin America. We're definitely seeing that. More unaccompanied children. So, you know, by far we are not a region where that's being impacted like other major cities, for instance. But you know, when there is an influx on the border, a portion of that we do see here. So yeah, I would say like in general, there is higher numbers in recent years that we've seen, generally speaking, coming through our agency as well in Cincinnati.
Okay, thank you for that. Jan, you had your hand up a few minutes ago. Do you still wish to ask a question?
No, I was just going to comment that I think Brian covered it. A lot of people think the southern border crossings are just by Latin people from Central America and South America and Mexico. But when I was teaching at Catholic Charities, I had many Congolese students who came through the southern border. So there are many people also from areas in Asia and Africa who come up through the southern border and make that terrible journey through the Darien Gap.
Okay, yeah. There's another question in chat that I don't think it's fair for us to try to answer. The question is, can you explain why Representative Landsman is against Biden's open door policies? And I don't feel comfortable asking our speakers to speak on his behalf unless his staff member wishes to, if Melissa feels that she wants to tackle that one. Other than that, I would say we can pass this question on to Greg and communicate his answer back to you. Melissa, can you comment in any way on that question?
I actually can't because I'm on the official side of the office and that's more on the political issue side. But I did read that article that the person attached, and he actually provided a statement for the article that shed some light on it. But I can't speak for him, but I can definitely pass that on and then get an answer.
Yeah, and we can follow up and try to post that, but I never want to answer a direct question on behalf of another person who's not in the room. Right. So we're going to have to leave that one out there for further discussion. And that gives me a chance. I don't exactly know what the vehicle is going to be, but Brian has offered to share his slides and information. Samantha has things to share. We are going to find a way, and I can't tell you precisely what that is, but we Women's City Club will find a way to post this information in a place that you can access it. I know that we intend to put Greg's video up on through our website. We do have a website at womenscityclub.org that you can go to. Sometimes it just has a link to take you elsewhere. So that'll be the place to look, and hopefully we can figure all this out in the next few days. And in our next update, we send out a weekly update with lots of information about what we and a lot of other agencies are doing. We will try to communicate with you through that update to let you know where this information is going to live, because it's excellent information and we do want to find a way to share it. I also want to do a little promotion real quick before we'll take some more questions, but I want to get this in before you all go away. you're welcome to join Women's City Club to be a member of us and to get all that updates and all that other good information about the good things we do. And I want to tell you too about an upcoming event that we are having, two upcoming events in February, the date yet to be settled. We're going to do an online conversation with our Hamilton County Sheriff, Charmaine McGuffey, about all the changes and updates that she has brought to the Hamilton County Justice Center. And then when the weather's a little nicer, we're going to follow that conversation up by taking a field trip and going down and touring the Justice Center. So look for information on our website about that. And then in March, on Friday, March 22nd, we have our annual National Speaker Forum. This is our primary fundraiser, also our flagship presentation, when we have just amazing people. A few years ago, on the topic of immigration, we had Helen Thorpe, who wrote a beautiful book called The Newcomers, and we had her speak at the National Speaker Forum. This year we have Jen White, who is the host of National Public Radio's 1A program, and she'll be speaking on truth in journalism. You can get information on our Women's City Club website, and if you wish to buy tickets, you do that through the Memorial Hall website. They take care of that for us. So those are my two little commercials. I'm just looking in chat. I see a thank you. If anyone on screen wants to unmute yourselves and ask a question, I think we have maybe a one or 2 minutes, and then we'll let everybody go home. But we don't want to make... Susan, do you have a question?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought
That's okay. No, I thought you did.
I thought I was muted.
No, you were. It's okay. If anyone has a last question, we don't like to leave any stones unturned. Any more questions from anybody out there on the call? Anything else any of our speakers want to say as a closing statement? Okay. Well, from the very bottom of my heart, I thank Tony and Samantha and Brian and Greg and Melissa for your contributions to tonight's program. This program was complicated on one way, but it came together so beautifully because you were all so generous and so willing to share your expertise and to come and help us all learn. So Women's City Club, we're living into our mission to educate, empower, and engage. If you get in contact with one of these organizations and become a volunteer, you'll be part of their mission success too, to get involved and to do something, to be an advocate. Thank you all for coming. If no one else has anything to say, I will bid you all a good night. If you please check us out, check out our website. Please consider coming to our National Speaker Forum, and hopefully we'll see you all again in February when we have a conversation with Charmaine, our Hamilton County Sheriff. So that'll be wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you all so much.
Thank
Great
you,
program.
everyone. Thank you.
Yeah. Tony, Samantha, Brian, you were all rock stars. Amazing.
You guys
Thank
are
you.
too. Thank you.
Thanks. Good to